Welcome. You may have heard this term, the science of teaching reading, kind of thrown around, and you're wondering inside of your head, what is it and how in the world does it apply to me as a reading tutor? Well, that is exactly what we are going to be talking about today. I'd like to personally welcome Julie Snell and Gloria Ingram into the house. Thanks for joining me today, you guys, along with everyone else who's here. If you haven't had a chance yet to type in who you are, where you're from, what you tutor, please do that now. And also, if you like content like this, subscribe, like this video, and subscribe to the channel so that you can always stay up to date when new videos come around. Now, we're going to be talking about today, what is the science of teaching reading? You know, the way that we have taught reading over the years has changed significantly. I have over on my a nice little momentum on my shelf to the right, and it is the McGuffey electric primers that they used to use in the 1800s. And I just thought it's such a cool reminder of where we have come with reading. And the purpose of those readers was to really practice the oral pronunciation of reading. So because there wasn't TV back in that day, right? And so they were really teaching people to read with expression. So when they entertained each other at night, if they were to read books, they'd be able to read those books and they'd be able to pronounce the words correctly and have their voice going up and down. But it really did not focus on comprehension whatsoever. And then the 1900s to the 1970s came, and research began to change because no longer were kids, in these one-room small schoolhouses, right, or being taught at home to read. They now were put into, the school system to learn how to read. And so they began, teaching kids how to read on a larger scale, more kids, all of that great stuff, along with they started realizing the importance of comprehension and really starting to hone into the differences between, the background knowledge that a child brings along with the information that they're learning. And they started to see that reading was kind of an interaction between the reader, what they knew, and the author and what they wrote. And then came the reading wars. These began in the 80s and the 90s. You may have heard the term, whole language versus phonics, right? There was a debate, which way is the best way to teach reading? And then in the 2000s, that National Reading Panel put together a report, and it was an entire group of people that from all the levels of academia that came together. One of those people was Sally Shaywitz, who was on the team. What they did is they took a look at all the current research, and they tried to hash on out what are the best practices in teaching reading. So when I was in the school system, that was the word and the term that they used. What are the best research-based reading practices to teach reading? And that's what they looked out to try to figure out during looking at all the studies that had been compiled over the years. And they found that there were 5 basic elements that needed to be present. They needed to have phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension instruction in order to be a good program. And then from there, we had the initiative of response to intervention, also known as RTI. Now, a lot of people, they confuse response to intervention and they think it is the intervention. It's just a structure for intervention. And this was in place because of special education. Lots of kids were being identified for special education when, if instruction was done differently, they never would have been needed to be identified as a special education student. So what response to intervention did is it took this 3-tier approach. The first tier was, everybody gets this instruction, right? And there are some kids, they're going to be proficient just with this level. They don't need anything else. And then you have your next tier of kids, tier 2. They're going to need a specific intervention to help them be able to get the skills in order to be at the proficient level. And then tier 3, those are those kids that are going to need one-on-one instruction in order to be able to gain the same skills that everybody was able to gain in tiers 1 and 2. So some people would say, well, what percentage, would fit into tier 1? What percentage would fit into tier 2? It doesn't look the same for any school. And as we're taking a look at these are really school-based initiatives that we are talking about here, right? So it's not a tutoring initiative, but today I'm going to be taking a tutoring spin on it so you can see how it applies to us. And then after response to intervention, which is still in place, they have now come up with the science of teaching. So the science of teaching is, I'm really excited about this because I have to say, when I was going through the school system, I was totally disappointed in the education that I specifically had. Okay? I didn't feel like when I walked into the classroom that I could meet the needs of all kids in reading. I didn't feel like I could meet the needs of all kids in science, right? I felt like I had like this background knowledge, but I didn't have any experience that could help me with that. What I think is cool about the science of teaching is it uses best teaching practices that have been discovered through research and are evidence-based as being proven systems. They have to know what those strategies are. They have to understand how they can modify different activities for all students, and they have to pass these proficiency tests. Yes, this is exactly what's needed. We need to know this stuff before we enter the classroom, because otherwise you're blindsided when you get there and you're like, wait a minute, my 3rd grade class ain't no 3rd grade class. I've got kids at our 1st grade level in this subject, at a 2nd grade level at this subject, a 5th grade level at this subject. Like, you can't just teach, to the middle. So this is an initiative that they're bringing on into the universities to prepare brand new teachers walking into the classroom. And it is also an initiative in the school system to make sure that what kids are being taught are research-based strategies. So no more hit or miss curriculum that is being thrown in there without, best practices being put into place based off of the research that has been done. The nice thing about this is it's not fully in law yet. Now, in 2021, it is in law that the kids that are going through the college realm are being taught the science of teaching and the science of teaching reading. But it is not in full swing yet for all of the other states until 2024. And that's for all schools and school systems. So this is like where the world is going. I think what's important is we have to know what those scientifically based research practices are versus just guessing from our gut and going with it, right? Guessing with our gut is good as long as you have the background knowledge. If you don't have the background knowledge on best teaching practices, you're really going to struggle on making sure that you're meeting the needs of the students that you're going to be working with and the children that you're going to be working with. So this is really, really important for us to really understand. So I have a guide. It was created, I'm going to share the screen with you, by Amplify. And this is the science of reading, making the shift, surveying classroom instruction. So it's going to be taking a look at what were some old practices that were done and what should be done instead. And I'm also going to put the spin on this for tutoring because there's a lot that we can take into consideration when we consider this, okay? So first of all, with the science of teaching reading, there has to be an assessment, or all kids need to be screened. Again, this isn't going to be put into place into all the schools until 2024. So some schools might already be on this and doing it and some aren't, but there needs to be a dyslexia screener in place so that you can catch those kids ahead of time instead of waiting until it is too late to be able to help them. And this is absolutely huge. Like, this should have been in place already, but it's not. This is why I always start each of my new clients and students with an assessment, because I need to know what I'm specifically dealing with. And then I have diagnostic assessments that I utilize to help me uncover some other things as well so that I can make sure that I am providing the best instruction for that child. All right, let's go to the next page here. So what is the science of teaching reading? I love this. It's so colorful and happy. Right here, we have, these are all the different pieces that we are talking about. Oh, great question. Peg asked, what are the 4 elements Joanne listed? There are 5. Phonemic awareness, phonics, comprehension, fluency, vocabulary. Okay, now that was based off of the National Reading Panel, the NRP, that was compiled and completed in 2000. But here is how it changes now with the science of teaching reading. Language comprehension. So it's bringing in the auditory along with the written word. And I think this is really important because if you struggle with hearing something auditorily, you are going to struggle later on as well when it comes to then reading it. So language comprehension, you understand language. Background knowledge, how much background knowledge do you have? Vocabulary, language structure, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge, phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition, and the word recognition. So this all comes on down into the science of teaching reading. So what does classroom instruction look like when it's based on the science of teaching of reading practices? So this is the ebook. You can download it at amplify.com. It's called Making the Shift. So you can put Making the Shift ebook inside of by Amplify, and it will come on up for you. In order to have a good program in the school system, you need to make sure that the instruction is explicit and engaging. This was something that was exposed in the National Reading Panel's findings, that especially when we're talking about phonics, that the phonics teaching is explicit and it follows a certain logical course. That means that we're not teaching A is for apple this week in kindergarten, and then next week we're going to teach B. B is for bat, right? We're not going to do that kind of a strategy. Instead, we're going to see what are the letters that are most frequent in our language that we need to learn to be able to read words. So like P, P, and T, actually, while they're at the end of the alphabet, they're going to be one of the first ones that you're teaching because they're going to be repeated more often than the other letters. So having an explicit and engaging process for word recognition that includes phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition is important. Now, do all of your students in tutoring need it? That is where our assessment uncovers this, because we have a different role that we play, right? we are trying to close the gap. I don't need to teach them from the very beginning again, right? So I'm not going through something that's going to teach them, things that they already know. I need to find out where are those gaps and then teach to that. And so if there is a gap here, let's say my dyslexic student usually does have some kind of phonological awareness gap. They do have a decoding gap. They typically fall into this, and I have to add this into their instruction. But for the kiddos that do not have this, they don't have dyslexia, they don't have a problem with decoding words, then I don't need to add this piece as largely into their instruction. I might still have some like decoding multisyllabic words, but I don't have to go like from the very beginning and teach the beginning skills to them, because that would be a huge time waster. They would feel like you're treating them like a baby, and they would not be engaged in the learning process. Then comes, you also want to look for instruction where students get to play with and manipulate sounds. This is phonological awareness. I teach people that phonological awareness, yep, and here it is. It's spelled on out here for you, Peg. Not polemic awareness, but phonological. Phono means sound. You're playing with sounds. So phonological awareness is where we're taking apart sounds. We're rhyming, right? So if I say the word book, and I say, tell me some words that rhyme with book, and you say look and cook, that's us playing with language. I didn't write those words down. We are just playing it. This is the way I usually describe it to people in my reading interventionist course. Phonological awareness can be taught with the lights off, and phonics is taught with the lights on. Now, sometimes they can be taught in correlation with each other, but for the most part, to understand the difference between them, it's an auditory processing process. It's auditory, it's verbal, and we are not looking at letters that are going to add confusion to the entire process yet. So with phonological awareness, the skills of reading begin with an understanding of sounds and words, and many students experiencing reading difficulties do not have a phonological foundation. So here's what to ask. Are there frequent opportunities for students to engage in sound and wordplay? Is the instruction sounds first so that oral practice with sounds precedes practice with letters? So it is, when you're working on phonological awareness, don't think about putting letters in front of them. That's phonics, okay? Just playing with sounds. So if I said k, at, and then you tell me the word is cat, perfect. Again, here we're not using that letter of the day approach. Instruction starts with letters first. So here's the other thing that you want to take into consideration. If I do an assessment, I find out the child does not have phonological awareness and is lacking phonics skills, I'm going to find out what letters do they already know and which ones do they not. And I don't ask them in alphabetical order, right? If I just put on up A, B, C, D, E, F, G on each different slide, ask them those letters, they might have memorized the alphabet song and be able to recognize those letters, but they won't be able to actually randomly look at those letters and be able to name them without the alphabet song in their head. So I put them in random order and ask them to tell me the names of those letters. I find out each one. And then the next activity I also do uppercase, I do lowercase. And then the next one I do is the lowercase letter sounds. And I do that because we see, when we're making sounds for letters, we typically will see them in lowercase form. So that's why I do the letter sounds in the lowercase form. And so here again, I'm finding out which letter names do they know and which letter sounds do they know. And guess what I'm going to do? The ones that they already know, I take out. Because why am I going to, if I'm trying to close the gap, can I close the gap if I have to teach them all of them from the very beginning? No. So what I do is I take out the ones they already know. I focus on the ones that they don't know. And most people don't take the time to do this. And it is amazing how fast you can close the gap when you find out the kid doesn't know the vowel sound for E and I. They're mixing them up. And they don't know the sound for W and Y. When you uncover that and you know that they know all the rest, it makes it easy to bring that on into your instruction. And that is exactly what we do inside of the reading interventionist as we get down to, okay, what do you know? What don't you know? What do I have to focus on? Let me teach that. And we build our lesson plans based off of their things that they are lacking so that we can close those gaps. For decoding, in the classroom, you want to look for explicit instruction and sound spelling patterns that include spelling and encoding. So here's what you're looking for. Are all 44 sounds included in a clearly outlined scope and sequence? Are decoding and encoding taught in tandem? Now, this is in the classroom approach, okay? This doesn't mean that in tutoring, if my focus is on reading, I can actually close the gap faster without putting the writing on in there, but you can add the encoding in there if that's how you want to go about teaching it. There's absolutely no right or wrong answer when it comes to that. You know, do what works for the child and what works for you. Here, you're avoiding incidental phonics instruction. They're just going to get it by accident. You know, that was the whole language approach, right? That they'll just start reading and they'll start guessing at words. They'll get them right or they won't get them right. And maybe I'll teach this pattern or maybe I won't teach that pattern. They're staying away from that kind of approach and being a little bit more systematic with it. For us, as we're tutoring, we really want to think about, again, what do they know and what do they not know? What should they know by this point that they don't know? Or what stage are they in the reading process? If they're at a first grade reading level, what skills should a first grade reader be able to do? And when you start taking a look at that, you can now break it down and say, okay, they know how to do this. They know how to do this. Awesome. But this, I'm going to circle this. They don't know this. They don't know this. And now you have more of a systematic approach because you're able to break it down by the skills that a first grader should have, identifying which ones they don't have, and then teaching them to the ones that they need to have. Here it says instruction stops after basic sound spelling patterns. You want to avoid that. They need to know as many of them as possible. Instruction without engagement. If the child is not engaged in this process, oh my gosh, I've seen this happen in the school system, guys. I've seen it where the teacher has been working with their students for 50 minutes lecturing. The kids had 5 minutes to read a book with a partner, and then they had 5 minutes to clean up. And I was like, something's wrong with this approach. If the child is not engaging and they're just sitting there trying to be a vessel, taking it all in, how effective will they be to applying those skills? They're not going to be very effective. And these kids, they weren't even like reading with a teacher or anything. They were just reading with another partner. And guess what? Both partners didn't know how to read. So like you go around and you start watching these kids and they're stumbling over everything. You're like, oh, this is not good. This is not good. So when you're teaching the kids, there has to be some kind of engagement going back and forth between them. You want to look for daily practice with decodable text that matches the scope and sequence of instruction. So now you want to put them into actual text that they have the ability to read. What I love about Raz Kids, you guys, is that Raz Kids actually has these sight word books built on into it. And there's even lesson plans if you need that lesson plan to walk you through. And there's even different worksheets to go from the word level to the to sight words to phrases to sentences. I love those worksheets to be able to work on with my kiddos before I put them on into a book, because then we're getting to experience all those difficulties that we would experience before we actually start reading. Here, good readers automatically connect the sounds of language to print. Regular practice ensures development of neural pathways supporting this automaticity. So this is what to ask. Do students receive explicit instruction in the code before practicing with connected text? So give them practice before and then put them into the text. But we can't separate text from being part of the process, right? You can't just give worksheets and different things like that to teach phonics. Are students taught to attend to all the sounds in each word? You know, again, you want them to take a look at those sounds, not just memorize words, but you want them to be able to apply that to new words that they see. So if I'm learning about would, I should be also teaching the words should and could because they all end in that OUD, right? And so those can be taught all at once. If I want to teach, the at pattern, I might be, the kids might be able to read now cat and hat and fat and rat and sat because they see that the only thing we have to do is change that first sound and at will stay the same. So being able to read those words very quickly is going to be able to help them. Here it says avoid the use of leveled texts, memorizing words using flashcards, and encouraging students to guess at words. These are the things to avoid. Now, this is for, again, those kids that are struggling with phonics. They're saying, look, you need to use phonics-based books with these kids that are struggling with reading. Leveled books can come in later. You can bring them on in because now the level texts do get a little bit more interesting. I love bringing them into that just to see, okay, where are they at? Once I get kids at a certain level with their phonics skills, I am able to start bringing them on into the leveled text. And some words they have to memorize, right? They just do. If we come on over here, look for instruction that focuses on a topic for 2 to 3 weeks. So building their background knowledge deeply about a certain topic is something that they're doing inside of the classroom. And are they bringing in rich topics that are relevant, that include science and social studies and the arts? Or are you switching topics frequently? Are students interacting with the content during instruction through speaking and listening and writing? And topics or themes that are too broad or general to consistently connect knowledge and build domain-related vocabulary. And I think this is important in the classroom because you're building it all up, right? In tutoring, it does become a little bit different. So there are things that I take into consideration. What is the kid interested in? Because when the kid is interested in reading what they have to read, all of a sudden, if they're interested in it, they already have background knowledge. So it's not my goal to create background knowledge in a tutoring situation. It's my goal to take the knowledge they have so that they can apply it to new books that they're reading, right? And so the approach is a little bit different than the whole classroom approach that I would be using if I were teaching them every single day. You want to look for purposeful activities that will help students understand how words are connected. So when it comes to vocabulary, I want to make sure that I'm bringing in rich opportunities to talk about the words, right? So they're saying stay away from like definitions and, repeated practice or just memorizing those definitions when it comes to it. Like, can they in context figure out what the words are? So if we take a look here, it says here, are vocabulary words pre-selected and connected to topic and text? And I want you to think about a full classroom, right? A full classroom, that teacher needs to decide what vocabulary am I going to teach based off of what my students know and the type of words that they are, okay? Does instruction include student-friendly definitions and multiple exposures? That's another important thing. In tutoring, right, I am able to ask my specific student that I'm working with, do you know the meaning of this word? What does it mean? And I can find out specifically what words I need to focus on with them so that when they get into the book, we have developed a little bit more background knowledge about that word instead of hitting it cold, right? And they understand more about what it is. And they say here, avoid memorizing dictionary definitions, right? Vocabulary words presented out of context, selecting vocabulary words that are easily understood in context. Yeah, I don't want to, if it's easily understood, if you can read the sentence and you can easily figure out what the meaning is, that isn't a vocabulary word that I should be teaching. But let's say I need to teach the word like omniscient, right? Omniscient means all-knowing. But that's one of those big words. Part of the problem for some kids, they can't pronounce it. If they can't pronounce it and they've never heard of it, then it's hard for them to retain it and hold on to it, right? So I need to think of opportunities for myself to bring on in omniscient. And what would that look like? So all-knowing, all-powerful. What comes to your mind when I said all-knowing, all-powerful? I might have a child say to me, God. Yes, God is omniscient. That would be an example. That would be a great example because he knows all. Us humans, we are flawed. We are not omniscient. We are not all knowing. Sometimes we might think we are, but we're not. Right? So it's having conversations about words with your students versus it be, okay, memorize this, write down the definition, put it on a Quizlet and practice it over and over and over again, and I'll see you next week. That's not going to help you. You need to think of real opportunities to use it in the language that you're speaking. I'll use it. I'll use the word and I'll see if they can catch it. Like we'll have a word of the day. If they can catch the word that I used just randomly speaking, they get a point. If they don't catch me, I get a point. And so if they use it, they get 2 points. And if I catch that they use it, I get 1 point. So we have like this little point system that goes on just to have fun with the vocabulary and try to get them to use it. And sometimes they use the word incorrectly. That's a part of vocabulary and knowledge and all of that kind of stuff. Yes, Esme just mentioned that with phonics, she assessed a kindergarten child was making his sounds incorrectly. Oh, I've had to work on this too. I have some kids are saying ba, ka, da, right? They add that right at the end. And that's because that's the way their parents were taught. So, you know, you don't know what you don't know, right? Like if that was the way that you were taught, then that's probably how you're going to teach your kid, right? You don't know. And so it's just a matter of correction. So what I'll do is I'll put the letters that they were producing incorrectly up on a thing, and I will talk about, you know, what are the sounds that are where we use our voice box, which ones we don't use our voice box, which ones we stretch like bubble gum, and which ones we pop like bubble gum. So if I were to say the p sound, I don't say puh. My voice box is off, p, and it almost feels like if I go like this, p, I can actually feel a push of air on my hand, p, but I don't say puh. It's not out loud. It's nice and soft, and it's a quick sound. It's a pop sound. So teaching them how to say the sounds properly, it's really hard to teach a kid to read that doesn't have that basic foundation in place. So it is important to listen to them when they're sounding out words, and are they doing that or not. For language structure, you want to look for activities that focus on understanding and constructing sentences. So are they analyzing sentences to understand text meaning? Does instruction include grammar and syntax? Grammar and syntax is like a huge piece that's like missing out of a lot of the curriculums, you guys. My kids went all the way into high school saying like, I'm not very good at grammar, Mom, because they didn't teach grammar. They just assume grammar based off of you speaking English. So it says, avoid focusing on after reading comprehension tasks and sentence diagramming without application. Oh my gosh, I remember sentence diagramming in 6th grade. It was awful. I hated it. It was terrible. And they're saying, skip that, unless there's some kind of application that you're applying it to. Verbal reasoning. Look for instructional approaches that support and develop the student's ability to make inferences from text. When I ask parents, like when they're struggling with comprehension, what's the number one thing you think they're struggling with when it comes to comprehension? They always say inferencing. And this is a very big one that we do need to teach our students how to do. How can they make inferences from what they are reading? So with verbal reasoning, what to ask is the content of the text at the forefront of instruction. Are students analyzing the content and the use of words, use of questions, visual, textual clues, graphic organizers, right? These are going to help aid their reading and comprehension. So it says here, what to avoid: reading strategies taught in isolation, or questions that do not require students to draw exclusively from the text. Like they're just like write their questions. I have kids that struggle even with just write their questions. So, I mean, sometimes that's where I have to start because that's what they're struggling with the most. they're not, forget it. Their comprehension is like zero when it comes to anything that they're reading. So then I need to teach them the different types of questions. What do they look like? How do you approach actually answering them? And I can only do that by one specific question type at a time. And for reading strategies, I can take a look and see what strategies are being taught for, like, what can they already do? Again, I'm listening to, can they make, a lot of people will mix up skills and strategies, by the way. A skill is something that you are asked to do on a test. A strategy is how you approach the reading while you're reading. So you might be, one strategy would be making connections. Are you making connections with what you're able to read? Are you able to make predictions? Are you able to summarize? These are things that a reader is able to do while they're reading. They don't necessarily need to do it after they're reading. After they're reading, they're going to ask you things like cause and effect. They're going to ask you main idea, author's purpose, right? Those are skills that the kids are being asked about if they can now apply those kinds of skills to what they just read. And a lot of kids have no idea how to start approaching those types of questions. So I teach them based off the types of questions they're getting wrong. And so I'm using the student. Now, I have the ability to do this, right? Because I'm working one-on-one with each of my students. So as I'm working one-on-one with each of my students, I'm able to determine what are they getting right, what are they struggling with, and what do I need to teach next? And this is all, because it's different than in a classroom where I have to make sure that the good first teaching is solid, right? Here, I'm filling the gaps for what the kid is not able to do based on where they should be at this point in time. Oh, thank you for letting me know that the audio is low. There's actually nothing I can do about the audio being low. I look to see I'm already completely 100% up. If I get closer to my microphone, does this make it easier for you to hear? Hopefully that is the case. I just need to be closer, put my mouth on it practically. And I can get it to be just a little bit louder. All right, so for literacy knowledge, look for instruction that teaches the purpose and characteristics of different text types. So an understanding of different text structures is really going to help kids to be able to understand what they are reading, okay? So does the instruction call attention to story structure? What's the difference between story structure and nonfiction, right? And then when we get into nonfiction, does it break it down into organizing it chronologically, compare, contrast, problem solution? How is the author organizing it? I even find that for me, it really helps to break down the text by also genre. And so if the child is reading about animals, there are certain things that we're going to learn about animals that usually are getting answered in every single book. Like, we're going to find out how the animal reproduces, where they live. We're going to find out what they eat. We're going to find out who their prey and their predators are, right? There's all this information that we will typically learn in any book that we read about animals. The same thing is true about if I learn about a place. I'm going to learn about when it was first, discovered. I'm going to learn about the people that live there. I'm going to learn about the land and what that looks like and the different types of land that they have. I'm going to learn about what it's like today compared to in the past. I'm going to learn about if there were any wars in that place or country, right? So knowing that ahead of time actually makes it a lot easier for me to read because I'm coming with that background knowledge on books about places or books about animals. So not only does it help when I think about how it's organized, but even the content and the genre. Some curriculums only focus on text types during writing instruction, and they don't focus on it during reading instruction. So they're saying avoid that. And lack of variety in text types. So don't always have just fiction books or just nonfiction books that only follow, let's say, chronological sequence versus a compare contrast sequence, or, a problem solution sequence. And then here it says your science of reading action plan. Now that you know what to look for in a curriculum grounded in the science of reading, it's time to make a plan to apply it with key instructional practices that you have learned. So you want, with phonological awareness, instruction where students get to play and manipulate with sounds. You want explicit instruction in sound spelling patterns that includes encoding, sight recognition, daily practice with decodable text that matches the scope and sequence of instruction. And this can all be broken down, again, by grade level, and it can be broken down by specifically the student, what they already know, and what they need to know. Language comprehension, we need to have in there the background knowledge, vocabulary, the language structures, the verbal reasoning, the literacy knowledge. And there is an amazing podcast. I was just listening to it this morning. It's called Science of Reading, the podcast. Definitely take a look at that. It's a really good podcast. In fact, the episode that I was listening to this morning was, will it tell me? It might not tell me. Oh, it was revisiting a conversation with Dr. Nancy Nelson. It was season 4, episode 13. I really appreciated that episode because it broke down the RTI, response to intervention, the multi-tiered systems of support, the universal screening and reading instruction. She talked about Dr. Nelson helped in the development of DIBELS and how it's important as a screening process to find out, are kids struggling with reading versus something that takes much longer and goes into more depth. So hopefully that is some important information as you guys go through. Now, the Reading Interventionist course that I created goes into how do we put this into practice for tutors? And what does that look like? So that you guys have the opportunity to be putting best teaching practices that are research-based into your tutoring, and you can be now gauging the results that each of your students is getting. You find out first where those gaps are, you close those gaps, and then you're able to move them forward. And it really, sometimes we make things harder than they need to be, and it's not as difficult as you might think it is. A lot of time has gone into simplifying the process so it works best for kids based off of best research practices, and instead of focusing on having tons and tons and tons and tons of different strategies that you're going to utilize, really breaking it down into more simplistic pieces of information. So if you didn't have a chance to watch the replay and you got my email about that, click that link and go and check it out. Also, inside of the replay here, if you're watching this live, there is a link. If you never saw how to close the reading gap a full year with 8 to 12 hours of instruction, try that out, listen to that. There's great information in there for you as you start thinking about it. And then if the Reading Interventions course is a great next step for you, definitely join us. Doors are going to close tomorrow night. I know some of you guys that are inside of this room already have been through the course and have said that it has just completely changed your life when it comes to teaching reading and specifically doing it online and in a tutoring method, because the classroom strategies, while some of the strategies we take out as best practices in the tutoring, we don't have to apply all of the first teaching strategies in a tutoring situation because they've mastered some and they haven't mastered others, right? Am I going to focus most of my time on the stuff they can already do or on the stuff that they need to be able to do to close the gap? I'm going to focus my time on the things that are going to help close that gap the fastest so they can get the best results in the lowest amount of time so that the kids can increase their confidence in how they feel about themselves. Did you know that a lot of kids actually they base how smart they are based off of their reading level? Type in the chat if you've heard this before, that they base how smart they are based on their reading level. I know I did. I struggled as a reader growing on up with comprehension. And I did struggle with a little bit with the phonics earlier in the days, but later on, later on, we are focusing on what they can do. Okay, so I have a question here. Are you sending a link for tomorrow night? Oh, great question. Am I sending a link for tomorrow night? Let me grab the link real quick for you guys. It is right here. I'm going to copy it so that you guys can see it if you're interested in being able to join us. And I'm going to type that on in. So you should be seeing that inside of both places and be able to join if you guys are interested in joining. I'm so glad that you guys joined me today, and let's keep learning about the science of reading. There's going to be a new conference coming up. Woohoo! All right, tell me if you guys are excited about this idea. I am going to be having a conference called Opportunity. So this is just for reading tutors. The next conference is going to focus on all of the science of teaching reading strategies that are going to help you as a tutor be able to get the results that you want. Free conference that you have the ability to attend from April 29th to March 1st. There's nothing to sign up for yet at this point in time, but I'm just kind of putting that bug in your ear that this is coming down the pipeline for you to attend. And again, it's going to be offered to you for free. You're going to hear speakers talking about the science of teaching reading. You're going to see different resources and tools that can help you in using these best strategies within your tutoring practice. And you're going to get to hear stories of other tutors that are putting these best practices into place so that you can get the best results with your students. And this is my way of giving on back to the reading community of all the knowledge that I've learned over the years, the connections that I've made, and bringing it all to you so that you can make the biggest impact on each of your students. I'm super stoked about being able to offer this 3-day conference to people, specifically in teaching reading to their students. Yeah! Alicia said, yes! Woo! Yes. And nothing like this has really been done for reading tutors before. That's why I was like, I'm doing it, man. I am doing it. I'm going to put together the best people that I can find to speak on these different topics so that we stay educated in best practices, even with our tutoring. Aw, thank you. I appreciate that, Alicia. She said anything from Joanne's worth doing and attending. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, thanks you guys for joining me today. I will see all of you guys soon. Join me back here next week, Monday and Thursday, and enjoy the rest of your day.